Welcome to the Infinite Wealth Podcast, where we teach clients how to build wealth and create passive income without the risk of Wall Street.
Welcome to the Infinite Wealth Podcast. I'm Cameron Christensen, along with our co-host, Anthony Faso. Welcome to this episode. This is going to be a follow-up to our interview that we had just recently with Robert Murphy, and that one was entitled The Next Recession, When and Why. And what we're going to be talking about today is 10 things that you can do to prepare for the next recession.
Right. And if you could go back, if you had a crystal ball and you could go back to 2006 or the middle of 2007, knowing that a recession is about to happen, wouldn't you love to be able to go back and maybe do things different? Maybe you wouldn't have so much fear. You would see a lot of the opportunity. Maybe you would have made some changes in your finance. But the point of this podcast is that you can do that right now.
Yeah.
Robert Murphy, a very well-respected economist, is predicting a recession. He actually said July. And I don't think anybody is going to argue we're due for one. And now we have an economist saying it was July. And I heard him speak at the Infinite Banking think tank about a month ago, and he said the same thing. That's why we had him on the podcast. But remember, that was before this whole scare with the virus, where the market is tanking and there's all this concern. He was saying that beforehand. So I think he's right, and I think if there's some valuable things that you can do now, some of the stuff you could go do today, right now, and be in a position to take advantage of these opportunities that are about to come during this next recession.
Man, how many times you had a conversation with somebody, Anthony, where they said, man, I wish I would have done this, right?
Yeah, all the time.
Exactly. All right, well, let's get started. So, Anthony, what is the number one thing that somebody can do to prepare for a recession?
I think it's all mental. You know, we talk a lot about mindset. We need to maintain a positive attitude. You need to realize we are going to get through this.
Yeah.
Right. I remember in 07 and 08 and 09, I was like, man, are we ever going to get out of this? And you know what we did?
Yeah.
Right. And we've done a lot of research on these other recessions. They always look doom and gloom. We always find a way to get through it. And I'm confident we will now. So we want to make sure that we maintain this positive attitude. We cannot be naive, right? I'm not saying, well, we just going to sit back and we're not going to do anything and just grip ourselves through it. We don't want you to do that. What we do want you to do is see this as opportunities, right? When you see the stock market crash, that sounds to me that could be an opportunity to buy. If and when the real estate market crashes, maybe your home is losing value, but that also means you can buy a similar home at a cheaper price. What I always say, I remember in my last house, our neighbor's house, one point sold for $600,000 at the peak, and then a year later sold for $300,000. Right, that person literally bought it for 50 cents on the dollar. Yeah. It took a while, but it did get back up. So we want to, by following these 10 steps and listening to this podcast and being educated and maintaining a positive attitude, we want you to be in a position to buy these assets for 50 cents on the dollar.
I agree with everything that you said. There is, when we're facing something like this scenario, it's a lot of times when we're saying prepared, people think of the finance part of it. But again, mentally being prepared for something that comes up like this is paramount. And a lot of times what happens is a lot of people kind of attach their identity to what they do versus kind of who they are, right? And so in times of turmoil, right, emphasize on certain things of who you are, right? You know, at the end of the day, you know, maybe I'm not an advisor anymore. Maybe I switch careers. Who knows, right? But at the end of the day, I'm still a husband. I'm still a dad. And in that scenario, my job, right, my responsibility is to kind of lead my family through adversity. And so if you keep that in the back of your mind, I think that'll help too.
I want to make one final point on this, on the number one thing, is rarely do you make good decisions based out of fear. Whether that is, should I sell this asset, or should I buy this asset, or should I liquidate it, or should I take this job, or whatever. We want to make sure that we aren't making decisions out of fear. I mean, there's always going to be some emotion. So we want to make sure that we have enough logic in there that we're not going to regret these decisions.
Really good point, Anthony. And how about number 2, right? What would you say would be the second thing that somebody could do?
This is going to be to analyze your current job. I know a lot of our listeners are trying to break out of that 9 to 5, or really that 9 to 8, or, you know, whatever it is we're working, trying to become self-employed and get financial freedom. However, that takes a while. And many of our listeners are still having a job. Now would be the time for you to analyze what the job, where you're currently at. What line of business is your employer in? Is it going to be subject or hurt during the next recession? Or maybe it's going to be, it's in a business model that can actually thrive during the recession. How is the management team and ownership? Are they strong enough to be able to lead the company through?
Yeah.
Right.
When I was thinking of this, is our second point here that we had written down, is we're thinking of analyzing your current job or your current situation. And I had 3 things that came to mind. Number 1 was kind of rebalancing that portfolio. It's always really sad to hear somebody losing money, but it's even more upsetting to hear somebody losing it just a few years away from retirement. Right. And so I would emphasize that. Always look at kind of what your scenario is, what's coming up in the near future. Then number 2 is I actually thought of Enron, right? And so what I wrote down is, do you invest a lot of your 401k in your employer's stock? If so, you could be a 2-time loser. You could lose your money and your income, right? So make sure you take a look at that. And then the other one was kind of a personal scenario for me. Was I was thinking of the health insurance that I had at my previous job before I moved over, and I lost some of the benefits that were available to me. Right. And so one of the things I said is, you've got some medical treatments that you've been putting off. Maybe now is a good time to take a look and consider doing those prior to a big change.
Great.
Yeah.
As you're analyzing your job, maybe it would be time to maybe make a move in anticipation of the recession. Particularly, it's going to be, if you think or particularly look at what happened during the last recession. Did they do layoffs? How did they handle that? They did do a lot of layoffs. You don't want to be caught in there being laid off when unemployment is in the double digits.
Yeah. Now
could be the time to make that move. And no matter where you're going to be, now would be the time to make sure that you're as valuable as possible to that employer. Is there a certification or a training class that you can take that not only makes you more valuable to that employer, it also makes you more valuable to the next employer if you do need to make it.
Really good point, Anthony. And so we just looked at kind of how you can analyze your current job or your current situation. But what would be point number 3 that you got written down?
I would say make sure we're caring for our loved ones. And I say that because many people have their life insurance and their disability insurance through their employer. Now, just to clarify, disability insurance means that if you're physically unable to work, that you will still receive a paycheck. If your life and your disability are tied to your employer, what happens if you get laid off?
It's gone.
Right? It's gone. Maybe your next employer has it. Maybe maybe they don't. Right? And even without a pending recession, I always warn people, we don't want to have too many of our benefits where we don't have control. Because if let's say, for example, you get sick, maybe cancer, or you had a heart attack, and you get laid off or terminated. If your health, life insurance, and disability insurance is through there, that's gone. And if you're sick Let's say you just had a heart attack. Cameron, are you going to be able to get life insurance or disability insurance?
No.
Right? So it's always better. We are big on control, and we want to make sure that you have control on a lot of your benefits, particularly ones that are going to affect your family.
Absolutely. I just was on a phone call the other day with a gentleman that lives in San Diego, selling his house. He's looking to move to Nevada for tax purposes and everything else. And we started going through what he had, and almost all of his benefits were tied to his employer. And so that was a good conversation for us or an opportunity to put some things in place to help him and his family out. Yeah. Awesome. What about number 4? What's something else somebody can do to prepare?
First one is, I highly encourage you. This is a great time. Take a little time out and review your expenses.
Okay.
I don't know. I mean, I know that there's plenty of things that I've signed up for and forgot to cancel. Or maybe there was a free trial and I tried it and then I just never took the time to make the call to cancel. I mean, for one example, we signed up for Disney Plus when it came out. First, I think there was a couple months free. And then with my daughter's surgery, we were going to have a lot of downtime. Yeah. So we could watch Lizzie McGuire like we did when she was little. And we watched some of that stuff. So it was really cool. But that was December, man. And it's March. And I'm still paying for it. Right?
Absolutely. I agree 100%. My wife she'll ask me several times throughout the year, hey, are you still using this? Right? Something pops up on her expenses and are you still using this? And of course, when I buy something the first time, I'm super excited. I'm in there. I'm looking at all these resources that are available to me. That excitement wanes, but yet I'm still paying for that membership. And so that's absolutely one thing that you could do is go in there and just kind of review your expenses. So great suggestion.
What I would do is just go through. This does not need to be complicated. You can just go online and just review a month of those charges of your checking account, your credit card. I'd also take a look at your paycheck. A lot of times employers will allow you to sign up for some benefit or something through your paycheck, and you don't even realize it because who looks at their paycheck anymore?
That's actually a funny story. I worked for UPS when I was going to college. I worked from 2 a.m. to 8 a.m. And I was there for, almost 3 years while I was going. This is you go off your comment up to look at your paycheck. Because before I left, I looked at my paycheck, and I don't remember the exact numbers now, but maybe I was, making $13 an hour or something. I looked at my paycheck, and it said like $11.75. And I'm like, wait a minute, that's not right. So I went in and I showed my superior, and I'm like, hey, I thought I was making $13 an hour. And he's like, let me see that. Anyway, so they came back and they went through and they retroactively made up and paid me for everything that they owed me. Right. So it was a nice little windfall there as I was leaving. I was planning on leaving like a month later. And so absolutely agree. Great point that you made there as far as making sure you look at your pay stubs and making sure you get what is rightfully yours.
Yeah. Well said.
Yeah. All right. So we talked about 4, reviewing our current expenses. What about number 5, Anthony? What's the 5th thing somebody can do?
We want to make sure that we were paying down bad debt, particularly high interest credit cards, right? And to me, there's a difference between good debt and bad debt. First of all, good debt would ideally be somebody else is paying it, right? Isn't that great debt? Yeah. For example, a rental house, or maybe your business has some equipment, right? Ideally, either somebody else is paying for it or there is an asset backing it up. For example, like a house. Like a car is kind of somewhere in the middle because, we could go down a long road of the value of a car, right? But, oftentimes I run into clients and they have a little bit of credit card debt. It's almost like it's a norm.
Oh yeah.
Right. I remember when we were first got married with my wife, I was like, we can't have any credit card. And she was like, well, you know what? Everybody has a couple thousand in credit cards. Right. That was a norm. But it also says, look, you married a CPA. Right.
We are not normal.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry,
We are definitely not normal, because a lot of times where I see people get caught up in they're chasing the points. They're chasing the miles of their credit card. So they end up putting everything on the credit card. Looking at paper, that totally makes sense. You're going to pay for it anyways. Might as well get a couple extra bonuses.
Sure.
But I will tell you, I have done that before, and I put everything on the credit card. But you know what? I still I spent more than I normally would. And when that bill came, I thought I was going to have enough cash in there to pay it off. But then I'm like, well, I'm just a little bit short.
Yeah.
I'll just pay it next month. The next month comes along, and then I'm a little bit short then. And then that little bit compounds into a lot. So for me, I just stopped chasing using those rewards credit card. But if you're falling into that circle, let's put pause. Let's make sure that we aren't carrying some high interest bearing balances.
Yep, I agree. Again, right, is like most people, everybody typically will carry some sort of debt, and what happens is they just kind of slowly chip away at it. Right now, with the kind of a potentially pending recession, would be a great time to be aggressive and start to pay that down.
I even was talking with a client today, and they're tackling their student loan debt, right? And one of the loans is almost paid off, and they actually have enough cash to pay it off. But when talking through them, we're like, you know what? I know it's going to feel good to pay that off, right? But if we look at them, and a lot of times we want to stop paying that interest. But if you have a small balance and over 6 to 8 months, right, the amount of the dollar of interest is really going to be small. And I'm not saying what you should or shouldn't do, but let's take that into account. We want to make sure that we have some liquidity. At that point, I may want to put that money in a savings account. And then every time that bill comes, I transfer it. This way, if something happens in the meantime, I'm going to have access to that cash.
Nice, great point. And how about number 6? What's the 6th thing somebody can do?
Well, if we are maybe planning on doing having a major expense, whether maybe you're going to redo the backyard because summer's coming, and you want to repaint the house, or you want to do a large vacation, or maybe you wanted to buy some toys, maybe a boat or a cabin. Any of those major expenses, I would recommend pausing a little bit. Let's kind of see where the economy is going to be at, for 2 reasons. For one, you may need that money for something else, right? Also, like particularly, the last thing you want to do is buy a toy or like a luxury item and then regret it.
Yeah.
Right. I bought these nice ATVs, and now
I lost my job and I can't use them.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you're going to look at them and with disdain, right? Also, you want to know what's going to happen during this recession. There's going to be some other people who bought those ATVs and they lost their job. And every time they look at them, it's full of disdain. They're going to want to sell them.
Yeah.
This is an example of an opportunity, whether that is some of these luxury items, particularly. I know we like to travel to go on vacation to Mexico, particularly those all-inclusive resorts.
Yeah.
Like, I like just not having to worry about the money. I just leave my wallet in the room, and I just enjoy, time with the family and the vacation. During after 2008, we got so many emails of deals.
Oh yeah.
Stay 1 week at 2 week, week 3, week free, or just some sort of these other deals. I want to make sure that I'm going to be in a position to take advantage of that.
Yeah, those are opportunities. And what you were talking about there is kind of on the buying side, is maybe you hold off on the buying. What I was going to touch on is maybe you consider selling, right? So maybe you're considering downsizing your house in a few years, and you look at the real estate market, and a pending recession right now might be a great opportunity to put the house up for sale, right? Or maybe you have got extra toys that have been sitting around that maybe you want to sell, or maybe you have a lake house that nobody uses. The kids are grown anymore, and you only use it 2 weeks a year. Now would be a great time to get rid of it. You'll save money on, well, if you sell it now, you're earning top dollar for it potentially, and then also you're saving yourself monthly payments moving forward. So kind of both sides of the coin there.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah. All right, moving on. Number 7. What's the 7th thing somebody can do?
I would say is let's boost your credit score.
Good point.
One thing I do want to make, I do think the credit score is overrated. I know maybe I'm contradicting myself. However, the credit score only comes into play when you want to borrow money from somebody else.
True.
Right? If you are becoming your own banker and you're not using other banks, who cares what your credit score is? Right? However, there can be some good opportunities there to use leverage to borrow money. And what's going to happen when this recession happens, people are going to be late on their bills, right? Everybody's credit score is typically going to go down. Thus, if you can get yours up, you are going to stand out from other people. Also, the credit market's tightened up.
Yeah.
Right? It was very difficult to get a loan in 08 and 09. The way the people did get the score, they're only going to loan it to people with the cream of the crop. So now would be a good time to review your credit score. And what I do personally, I think is a great tool, and it's free. It's called creditkarma.com. And they actually just got bought by Intuit, which is the same company that does TurboTax and Mint.com, and actually, they do a lot of high-end tax software, and they also own QuickBooks. But once you get set up on there, they're going to give you can see your credit report. Are there a couple things that maybe some derogatory marks that you didn't know were out there? Now's the time to go ahead and get that cleaned up. Also, Credit Karma will walk you through some ways to improve your credit score as well.
Great, really good points. That kind of, speaking of credit, kind of takes us into that 8th point that we've got written down. Anthony, what's the 8th thing that somebody can do?
Is now's the time to get a line of credit.
Okay.
Like, the old saying goes, banks only want to loan you money when you don't need it.
Yep.
Right. And, a friend of mine used this example that banks are like your neighbor who will loan you an umbrella when it's sunny out. Right. And then when it starts raining, there's a knock on the door. Hey, Anthony, that umbrella I loaned you, I need it back. I'm like, well, now it's raining. I know exactly. That's why I need it back. Now, particularly for a business, this is a great time, whether it's a business line of credit or a HELOC. Now is the time to get that credit. Because if you wait till after the recession, it's too late.
Absolutely. And you would talk about going down and securing a line of credit. I was going to share a story here about a good colleague that we know, an attorney that back in 09 had a couple $100,000 line of credit for his business, and has a very successful business, had never been late, never missed a payment. And the bank actually called him up and they called that line of credit. You know why they did that, Anthony?
Why?
Because they could.
You got me into that one.
They did it because they could, right? And it had nothing to do with his track record, his history of payments, or his financial situation. It had everything to do with the economy and everything else that was going around. And that was one of the reasons. That was really the main reason why some of the strategies that we suggest clients really appealed to this business owner, because of that situation right there. He'd been through that instance of having just lack of control, and he never wanted to be in that position again.
Right. And during the last recession, I had a line of credit on my house, and you know what the bank did? They did the same thing. They called it. I mean, I thought I had this resource, and all of a sudden I didn't.
Yeah.
But that's a problem with banks. Again, they only want to loan you money, when
you don't need it.
When you don't need it. Right? So now's the time to get your lines of credit. And also, we're going to need to do a podcast on velocity banking. I'm getting some questions on that.
Okay.
One of the risks of that is, again, just like you said, Cameron, that line of credit from the bank can be easily called like that.
Yeah.
Right. So we want to make sure that we're in a position where we're going to have some more control.
Absolutely. All right. Moving on. Number 9. What is the 9th thing that our listeners can do to prepare for this coming recession?
This is something hopefully people are already doing, but I call it a side hustle or a side gig.
Okay.
Right. Now, there's a couple ways that you can look at doing this. For one, do you have a skill set that maybe somebody else could hire you to do? Maybe you're a writer or a photographer or whatever it is. Maybe what you're doing for your employer, there might be some other business that needs your help but can't afford somebody full time.
Yep.
This could be a great way for you to network, to earn some extra money, and make sure you're not solely dependent on that one stream of income from your paycheck. A couple things you can look at is freelancer.com. You can post what it is you do, and people can go through there and hire you. There's fiverr.com. There's a lot of websites there that will put, you know, the service you have and the person who needs it together. One of the reasons why I like the side hustle is from the tax advantages, right? I know every podcast we got to talk about taxes, right? Right. W-2 employees, they get screwed when it comes to tax time.
Mm-hmm.
The people who can take advantage of the tax code are not the employees, it's the employers. It's the people who own the business. And by you having your own business, you can put what I call a business spin on an otherwise personal expense. For example, your cell phone, right? You're going to have the cell phone.
Yeah.
If you're an employee, you can't write it off. Maybe your car, some meals and entertainment. So there's some things that we could do to save some money in taxes as well.
I love it. And when I was thinking of this one, when we wrote it down, we'd written side hustle, but I think you kind of touched on it, I was thinking of I wrote down reconnecting with your network, right? So that kind of plays into your side hustle. And I've got a friend that's on social media, and I love following him because he's super outrageous. But I would say probably 4 or 5 times a week when somebody posts, "Hey, I'm looking for X," right? He says, "I know how to solve that." He's like, "Network, right? I've got a problem. Go network," right? And so it's just a great response to kind of getting out there and building that network in anticipation of a potential move. And what also came to mind was, man, if something does happen, if we do have a layoff, man, one of the best things that you can do is reconnect with that network that you have before, that professional network with some colleagues, and man, reach out to them, right? During recessions is one of the best times, or you see this opportunity for someone to start their own business. And so reach out to some colleagues that you admire, that you respect, and that, maybe you guys potentially discuss some sort of joint venture if it comes down to it. But again, it all starts with your network.
Right. And if we're looking for a side hustle, the low-hanging fruit is really taking your expertise and trading your time for some money. Ideally, if you're listening to this podcast, our goal is to stop exchanging our time for money. We want our money to make us money. A couple of resources to create a business or something that is more passive, where you're not trading your time for money. One of the best books, I think, is The 4-Hour Workweek.
Okay.
Right. I wish I would have read it sooner. And the reason why I didn't read it sooner is because I enjoy what I do.
Yeah.
And if I only worked 4 hours, man, I don't know what else. I mean, it sounds great, but I enjoy coming here. I want to still still work. So I put it off for a while, but then I kept on hearing about it.
Yeah.
Particularly, he was on a good podcast with Gary Vee. So I checked it out. In there, there are some great resources in there. Probably the best is when he really goes through a process that you can follow to find an online business. And what he's looking for in guiding you through is one that takes very little time, very little overhead, and something that you can do remotely. If you're looking to start your own business and don't know where to go, check out the 4-hour work week. In there, he also has some links to some current blogs where people that are explaining how and what they're doing in creating these side gigs. And maybe one of my favorite side gig is from the Land Geek. Hopefully you guys recorded that saw that podcast. If you didn't, I would highly encourage you to go back and check it out. The Land Geek has, I won't go into details here. However, there's a process there where you can create some passive income with very little upfront dollars. It is going to take some time, but I think once you get through the learning curve, the time should be very minimal. Highly encourage you to check out our podcast in the Land Geek. Also, in the show notes on there is he gave us a link for a free course. I'm not sure what he calls it, but he sells it for $97. But if you use that link, you can get access to it for free.
I believe it was a toolkit. That's what it was called in there. But I might be redundant here because you were talking and I was writing, so I didn't listen to everything that you said, surprisingly.
How dare you?
But when we were talking about a side hustle, I think you were referencing Gary Vee. But Anthony, you and myself are also very versed in creating cash flow, right, as a side hustle.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you guys have questions, man, feel free to call us, right? Our link will be down in the show notes, 15-minute phone call. We'll be able to analyze kind of your situation. We'll ask you some questions and maybe ask some questions on your skill set and help point you in the right direction on some of our podcasts or some of the people that we know that may be a good fit for you. So make sure you click on the show notes, call us if you have any questions. And finally, now we're at number 10, the very last thing that somebody can do to prepare for a pending recession. Anthony,
I'm just going to go. The most important thing is in anything is maintaining the proper mindset. Number 2, is having an opportunity fund.
You said number 2, but we're on number 10.
Right, but this is a second.
I got you.
Right,
okay.
yeah, mindset's a priority number 1, and the opportunity is priority number 2.
I got you. Okay,
right?
I'm catching up to you.
Okay, yeah. Okay. There is going to be opportunities. Just as we had talked about before, when my neighbor's house sold for 50 cents on the dollar.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that person was able to use all cash?
Maybe.
Probably. When that market is tight, it can be very difficult. In fact, I recall what this individual did, and I know a lot of them did because I did a lot of their taxes. They were going in with cash and buying it, right? Because if the better, what I like to say is the bigger the opportunity, the smaller the window for you to take advantage of it. If a house goes up for sale or whatever that asset is, there's going to be some people that need that money and they're willing to take something less than what the market's doing. Particularly if the market's going down, they're like, well, if I wait a month, I might even get less. By having that ability to do a quick close, particularly in a house, if you were selling your house and you had somebody who says, hey, I'm going to use conventional financing, I need an appraisal, and then we need about 30, 45 days to close. Or you have an investor who's like, hey, I'm going to give you all cash. I don't need an appraiser. I'm going to close in 5 days. Who are you more likely to sell it to? Right? And oftentimes they're willing to sell it to the guy for cash or the gal for cash for less because of the risk of the deal going sour is much less when somebody's coming in with cash.
Sure, as you're building that opportunity fund, now is a great time to kind of revisit your current strategy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the reason that I say that is because we work with a lot of clients that have come to us over the years, and their current strategy is mainly be invested in the market, right? And so if you have volatility in the market and that drops, you're now subject to the volatility of the market. If you're not in the market, or a majority of it is not in there, now doesn't that just become another opportunity for investments?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Doesn't that relieve some of the panic that most people, or some of the concerns that most people have right now? Absolutely, right? And so now would be a great time to kind of revisit, reach out to us, let us know if you have any questions, and we can kind of explain what we're alluding to as far as getting you in a position to look at market downturn as an opportunity instead of worst case scenario.
Perfect.
Yep.
I think we're good.
I think so. We've got all 10.
Okay. Good. Awesome. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. Now go make it an awesome day.
Take care.
Thanks for listening, and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on the next episode. Also, check out our website, infinitewealthconsultants.com, to find our podcast along with other additional resources.